Da 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 What's up, everyone? How you doing? Today we are looking at playing a bass line with the bow. That little ditty I just composed was a bass line for Big Sciota, the fiddle tune we learned last time around, playing pits. And it's a bass line that is simple, but very well composed, if I do say so myself, and has some really interesting things that we can talk about. And what you just heard was an example of what you might play the first time around a tune. It kind of, let's say you were with a band, you're rehearsing, there's an arrangement happening. Someone in the band's like, oh yeah, what if we started? It's kind of like a little bit simmery, and it's not quite like the time hasn't fully come in yet. The band isn't really playing a full groove yet, but we want it to kind of be ethereal and mysterious. That's a perfect example of where, oh yeah, let me get the bow out and try playing a bass line with it. And you can come up with some really interesting stuff. And you'll run into that more times than not. And even in a jam setting, if you're with people you trust and you're comfortable with, whip it out and start playing a tune with the bow. Just the first time around, just like what I just did. And then you'll probably see there's a natural progression where, oh yeah, maybe we're going to start playing, time. And when I say time, I mean, a groove. The standard, the normal kind of bass line we all play. That's called time in musician speak. So we're looking at this bass line that I just wrote. And the first thing you might ask, just pay attention to my left hand. When I play that G note, I'm not playing the open G string. And this is something that's a personal preference of mine. When I play with the bow, I really tend to like playing closed notes. And this is maybe something I got from playing in orchestras or playing in small chamber ensembles. But the closed note on the, let's say, this G on the D string, it has like a warmer quality to the open G. And it also allows some vibrato and just a little bit more affectations to take place. I like that sound more than this. That second one is just very harsh and kind of, aggressive in a way that I don't personally like. So I really tend to look at how to play a note in a closed position instead of an open string when playing with the bow. Like I said before, playing with pits, I love playing open strings. I think it has a real pop, very percussive. Bow, I like the alternative. So that typically means, when you have an open string, you're like, okay, where's that closed version of that note? It's on the string below it, and it's on the 5th fret, if you're thinking about it in frets. So you can put your pinky down and try to find that note. You should be able to bow both strings at the same time and get a unison G. Same thing with D, and same thing with E. Or sorry, with A, that is. There's no closed low E. It's just that. So again, G, D, and A. Okay? So I'm going to use closed notes whenever possible in this bass line. And next thing to look at, I think that's important, is changing bow direction. And, we talked about this briefly in the last video, where we're talking about, up bows and down bows and trying to keep that bow shifting invisible. And I had a really specific way of changing bows in this bass line. First 2 measures under that melody, I play a down bow, that's frog to tip, this direction, and I let it, I hold that note for 2 full bars. So thinking about that, that's 8 full beats of a G, and you really gotta keep it slow when you're playing that. Talking about speed, you might need to give it a little bit more pressure when you're going slower to get a good sound, because you need to save room. It's almost like a breath, If you know you can't take a breath for 8 beats, prepare for that beforehand. And back to that high G. So the second half of that bass line, 8 beats of this, and then I go up bow on the G, down bow on the C, slur to the D, and then up bow on the low G and reset on the high G. I'll do it all in time. And when I say slur, that means that I'm not changing bow direction when I'm going from C to D. And that's all so I can set myself back up to get back on a down bow for the second half of the A part. Watch and see if you can pick up what I'm talking about. So the second A part, the only difference is I'm ending on that high G. I like playing around with different ranges for cadences. So first half, I cadence, which means kind of the period of the phrase, the final note of the phrase, on the low G. And then came back up to that high G. Second time around, then I can start the B part on the low G. So wherever I cadence, I then choose the other octave for where I start the next phrase. It marks the ending of the phrase and then the beginning of the next phrase if you use 2 different octaves of G. So let me play the whole A part one more time, and then we'll move on to the B part. Listen for how I'm cadencing and see if you can pick up on all the other stuff too. And then you're in the B part. So I think that's another really interesting thing. So number 1, try playing closed notes instead of open notes when you're playing a Arco bass line. And number 2, if the ending of a phrase is the same chord as the next phrase starts, you can try playing around with a different octave of those notes, whether it's a G or a D or any note, just so you can differentiate the cadence of the first phrase and the beginning of the next. Cool. So that's pretty much the whole A part. The B part gets interesting because I start adding some melodic moves, notes that aren't, the roots of the chords we're playing. So I'm starting on that low G. That's my first one. When I go like this. I'm playing that D, goes C, D, E. And I play that D as a walking note up to the E. Just a melodic move that I think is really nice. And I slur that with the C. So I'm not adding an extra bow change. Up, down. And that is kind of an interesting thing, because we are using our first finger on the C, and then we're sliding with our first finger to the D and ending on the E with our fourth finger. This is all on the A string. And we're going up way high on the A string so we can keep this melodic consistency. I'm not going C, D. I'm not using the E on the D string. I want a connected sound with that phrase. And if you play it all on one string, you get a more connected sound. Listen from the beginning of the B part. That's Sorry, that's actually down, up is what's going on there. So listen to the difference between those two. It would be versus. One more time. Listen to how disconnected that sounds comparatively. Each string has its own kind of color and voice. So when you want to have a nice connected sound and kind of a connected idea, think about playing all those notes on one string. I think it really benefits the sound. So I'll play the full first half of the B part. So that quick C, D, G at the end, that's down, up, down, up. And then, again, I cadence on that low G, and I start the next phrase on the high G. Again, way to differentiate the phrases. And then the second half of the B part, so besides that, using the high G instead of the low G, the other difference is I'm adding that B note going to C, which I totally love. But watch how my bow isn't changing. The bow movement is identical in both B parts. The difference is I'm adding the extra note. So, once you have a nice motion back and forth with the bow, don't feel like you have to add more bow changes to get something different. Just think about adding one of those nice little melodic notes like the B going to C. And that can easily be something new without having to do anything with your right hand any different. It's just on the left hand. So again, second half of the B part. So, and another difference is I'm, playing that C with my second finger now because the B is with our first finger. So it's 1, 2, and then 1, 4, going up to the E. So recapping things in the B part that are different. I'm adding melodic notes going in between the chords, but those melodic notes aren't changing the bow direction at all. They are being incorporated as a slurred note with the chord beforehand. And then the next chord you play, you land on the downbeat just as you would if you didn't have that melodic note. So both B parts have that D going to E minor, and the second B part has the B going to C as well, kind of as an added bonus. And same thing, thinking about cadencing on one octave and starting the next phrase on another. This time in the B part, I'm starting on the low G at the beginning, and then the second half of the B part, I start on the high G. I just kind of went with my instinct on that, like what felt most comfortable. But yeah, so that's pretty much this bass line broken down. It sounds simple on the surface, but there's really a lot going on. And, you got to think about bow speed, when you have 2 beats on one note before your next bow change, you can move quickly. You actually should move quickly so you can use all the bow to start again. When you have that 8-beat G at the beginning of the A part, you got to move slow. So, I'll play the entire thing. Maybe I'll do it 2 or 3 times in a row. And for those of you that have notation, down bows look like little legs, I guess you can call it, like little legs, and an up bow is like a V. So that just to remember which is which. And the slurs are kind of like, you'll see them, note connected to the next note with this kind of curved line. Kind of looks like the Amazon smile. Not to be so corporate, but that's the best way to put it. So let me just play this 2 more times, and I'll slow it way down too, so you can learn it off the video as well if you like. Da da dun da 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 dun da da ga 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 da da dun da 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 dun da 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 ga 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 dun da 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 da. da 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 Thanks so much again, everyone. Have fun with this bass line. Really try to internalize some of these concepts so you can apply them to other tunes. And stay tuned for some exercises to do with the bow next week. So thanks so much, and I'll see you then.